Just over 65 years ago, an alleged UFO crash occurred in the port city of Gdynia in northern Poland. In some publications, this event is described as the Polish Roswell. What really was the object that fell into the harbor basin? What about the alleged survivor found on a Gdynia beach? Will we ever know the whole truth about that event? Let us recall that this strange and mysterious event took place between 5 and 6 in the morning on the 21st of January 1959. Then, accompanied by a very intense sound, a large orange glowing object surrounded by red light, dragging a short tail, fell into the harbor basin. The event was observed by many witnesses who were already working the morning shift in the nearby shipyards on that dark January morning. The citizens' militia was immediately notified. The latter, fearing that it may be either a fragment of a Western spy device or a missile, or an attack by hostile Western forces, calls the security service to the scene. The security service manages to extract and then secure a cylindrical object, as if made of glass foil and filled with a strange rust-colored substance. According to other reports, a fragment of a metallic object was recovered that did not rust and could have been a fragment of a meteorite. This item was examined by scientists from the Gdynia University of Technology, but no clear conclusion was reached as to its origins. Press articles from that time, as well as much later print and online publications, present various versions of this event. According to some sources, a few days after the fall of the mysterious object, a Coast Guard in broad daylight came across a strange male figure, a creature about 160 centimeters, about 5 feet and 3 inches tall, who, completely exhausted, was struggling to walk along the sand by the water. The creature did not speak any known language and wore some kind of uniform or overalls. There were visible burns on the creature's face. The mysterious individual was taken to University Hospital and examined. However, when an attempt was made to remove the previously mentioned uniform or overalls for a more thorough inspection, it turned out that it had no visible fasteners, buttons, buckles, zippers, or other means of opening. Moreover, the material from which it was made did not resemble any material from which this type of clothing is usually made. It was a rather metallic and hard material that could only be cut using special tools. Doctors managed to observe that the creature's internal organs were different from ours. The circulatory system was spiral, and the number of fingers and toes was 6. The creature remained alive throughout the study. However, when something like an armband was removed from his arm, he died. According to unconfirmed rumors, his body was then transported in a special refrigerator to the Soviet Union, where it was placed in an underground bunker near Moscow for further examination. Other sources say that the alien's body still lies somewhere in the basement of the hospital. There is another version, according to which not one, but 2 creatures were found on the shore. The first of them actually died, while the second one remained alive for a long time, and after removing the band or bracelet from his arm, he fell into a kind of coma or lethargy. Because the alien was still alive, he was not sent back to the USSR, but placed in a secret place in Poland, in a room intended to support his basic life functions. According to some ufologists, there is a close correlation between the fall of the mysterious object into the water and the discovery of the strange creatures on the beach. Others, however, add that these are just unsubstantiated rumors. So many years have passed since those events, let us add, that took place during the quite strict communist regime, that it is difficult to determine what is true and what is fabrication, fiction, or exaggeration. Interestingly, before the report of the object falling into the harbour basin appeared in local and then national newspapers, a strange orange flying object was also observed on the morning of the 23rd of January. Some observers and journalists have hypothesized that the alleged UFO that fell into the port basin was being searched for by other objects. And indeed, at that time, there were at least 2 observations over the Tricity. As you can see, many often contradictory reports, observations, hypotheses, and revelations appeared in connection with the mysterious January event of 1959. In fact, the only thing that is known for certain is that it was then that a brightly glowing object fell into the water on the port quay. So what could the events in Gdynia actually be? Polish Roswell or an urban legend? Considering the time in which the incident occurred, the year 1959, a period in which, although the hardest and most terrorizing communism had already ended, but the Polish state was still in the steel embrace of the Soviet Big Brother, it is possible that another solution should be sought. This event was most real. The object that fell into the water, and also the same one, that was pulled out of the water, although extremely mysterious, was very real. Unlike Roswell, however, there was no crash of a flying saucer in Gdynia, but either an astronomical phenomenon, such as the fall of a meteorite, or the crash or loss of parts of some Soviet or Polish device, perhaps of military purpose. But what about the creatures mentioned above? We will come back to that, dear viewers, later in this video. Due to the time in which the incident in Gdynia occurred, any found items of unknown provenance were reported to the citizens' militia, which most often involved the security service in the investigation. Therefore, regardless of whether it was a space vehicle, a rocket of an enemy power, a meteorite, part of Soviet or Polish military equipment, etc., the reaction of the relevant services would be similar in every situation. There is also a possibility that some real event was covered up with a journalistic rumor, the so-called canard. Stories about UFOs and aliens could have been a cover for a much more mundane, and for the militia, army, and the security service much more serious incident, for example, the loss of a rocket, parts falling off the plane, etc. On the other hand, it could also be that the stories about metallic or cylindrical objects discovered at the bottom of the pool provided cover for a real UFO sighting and/or alien contact. The so-called dialectical materialism did not allow such revelations to be publicly announced. It should be remembered that at the end of the 1950s, more than one such event, or spectacular observations of UAP objects, took place in Poland. Many of them looked similar to what witnesses from Gdynia described. So what really happened in Gdynia? The crash of an alien flying object, or maybe something much more mundane, but equally mysterious? If a UFO did not crash in Gdynia on the 21st of January 1959, what alternative solutions can we propose? The first hypothesis is about a meteorite, or rather a fragment of a meteorite. As it passes through the atmosphere, such an object would heat up to a very high temperature, and at the same time, some of it could start to evaporate, which would explain both its orange-reddish color and the trail behind it. However, if we were dealing with even a relatively small fragment of a meteorite, depending on the material it was composed of, it could weigh from 1 ton to even 7 or 8 tons. If such an object fell into the port basin in Gdynia at a significant speed, instead of a local splash of water, we would hear an almost apocalyptic bang and a spray of water gushing to a great height, and the meteorite itself would probably break up into even smaller pieces. According to eyewitnesses, the water shot up to only about 1.5 meters, which contradicts the meteorite theory. Even a small fragment would have caused a larger splash. Moreover, if a meteor had actually fallen into the Gdynia port basin, it would have aroused the interest not only of the militia and divers, but also of astronomers, but nothing like that happened. The second hypothesis that can be put forward concerns something, or object, or part of it, made by humans. Eyewitnesses claim that the incident in Gdynia was accompanied by a loud sound, resembling first the grinding of metal on metal and then a strong impact. Such a sound could be associated with, for example, a military plane flying over and falling into the water, either the entire machine, but here, as in the case of the meteorite, it would cause much more spectacular visual effects and destruction, or its parts. In 1959, both the Polish army and the Soviet army stationed in Poland at that time already had relatively modern Soviet machines, which, however, were characterized by a fairly high failure rate. It is therefore possible that the plane lost some part or the missile suspended underneath it. Of course, in such a situation, press reports about a flying saucer or an unknown object could have been an excellent cover, preventing the real cause of the accident from being known. Accident, not a mysterious crash of an extraterrestrial object. Neither the Polish nor the Soviet army could afford such a blunder, which, even worse, could reveal to the Western world the weakness of the enemy's weapons. There is another possibility related to this hypothesis. On the 18th of December, 1958, the American SCORE satellite was launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida. The satellite, among other things, was used to transmit to Earth the speech of the then President Dwight D. Eisenhower. However, this satellite did not orbit in space for very long. After some time, it began to descend only to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere on exactly the 21st of January 1959. Is it possible that while flying through the Earth's atmosphere, the satellite broke into many small pieces and one of them fell into the water on the Gdynia Key? This possibility cannot be completely ruled out, even though the entry into the Earth's atmosphere occurred somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. The problem in interpreting what really happened in Gdynia on the 21st of January 1959 lies in the multitude of sometimes inconsistent reports, observations, and articles. Some sources spoke of a flying saucer, others mentioned a metallic object pulled out of the water by divers. The port engineer, Alois Data, talked about a cylindrical object, apparently made of glass foil, filled with a rust-colored substance. Some witnesses talked about a small object, others about a large one. There were also mentions of the previously discussed humanoid. All this made the mystery strange, difficult to solve, and ambiguous. If something really amazing happened in the port that day that required immediate investigation, then the port would have become a real hotspot in an extremely short time. Regardless of affiliation to a specific political bloc, the army can act quickly in such situations. If this were true, someone would certainly notice something and report it to the press or radio, or simply to other people. Either way, the situation would not go unnoticed. However, no such thing happened. Or maybe it did, but after 65 years, human memory fails and some witnesses are no longer alive. Maybe we were actually dealing with a completely incredible and hard-to-believe crash of an alien vehicle. Let us remember that at the turn of the 1950s and 1960s, there were many observations of alleged foreign objects around the world, in Europe and also in Poland, observations that were treated very seriously. So was the Gdynia incident related to this wave of observations? Or maybe the matter was only blown up by the sensationalist press, eager to attract readers, and the UFO object is just a hoax. The third hypothesis is somehow related to the second one, and concerns the disaster of a Soviet rocket, or rather a probe, which could have missed the target, and one of its fragments would have, or could, fall in the port of Gdynia. At the time, such attempts were taking place, and there were rumors that not all of them were successful. There is no need to explain, of course, that it was of the utmost importance for the Soviet Union to keep such incident as a strict secret and to circulate the story about the crashed flying saucer. Unfortunately, the number of circumstantial evidence, hypotheses, views, reports, articles, etc. is too large to be able to form a coherent whole and clearly and decisively determine that it was an accident of a UFO or an ordinary accident of a man-made vehicle. After 65 years, it is difficult to find sources, let alone witnesses. But let's get back to the most interesting thread related to this story, namely the alleged alien found on the beach, or two aliens. Information on this subject appeared only almost 10 years after the incident in Gdynia, which could indicate a complete lack of connection with what happened there on the 21st of January 1959, but also, on the other hand, could indicate that only after almost 10 years later, such a controversial topic could see the light of day. We learn about the alien being on the beach from a little-known UFO writer, Arthur Shuttlewood, in his 1968 book, Warnings from Flying Friends. According to Shuttlewood, a Polish ufologist told him about the alien found on the beach in Gdynia. Could it have been Bronisław Rzepecki? But in fact, we do not know any additional details or sources. As we have already mentioned, according to Shuttlewood, this creature was a short-statured humanoid that had injuries and spoke an unknown language. After being found, the creature was taken to hospital, where it turned out that it had a different number of fingers. However, there are also other versions of the story that provide different details, which complicates matters even further. Some information suggests that the event may have been used as material for a film rather than as actual fact. The fact that the creature was described as remarkably human-like and differing only in a few details could indicate, but does not necessarily have to, that the description of the alien is unreliable, making the entire story unbelievable. On the other hand, over the last several decades, eyewitnesses have come across creatures so different in appearance that it is possible that some of them resemble humans. Another issue is the size of the object that fell in the port of Gdynia. Various accounts describe it as considerable in size, or, on the contrary, minute. If the object was small, some witnesses say it was about a meter in diameter, a humanoid creature about 160 centimeters tall, could not have fallen out of it. So either the whole story about the alien or aliens found on the beach is just a joke, gossip, disinformation, or these creatures and the object that fell into the sea are two different issues. Unless those witnesses are right who claimed that the object was quite large, or that only a fragment of a much larger object fell into the water. There is one more aspect of this matter, in a sense also cosmic. At the end of the 1950s, fascinated by the possibilities of conquering space, both Americans and Russians began intensive work on sending people into space. Before successful manned flights, such attempts were made by testing the possibilities of spaceflight on animals. These experiments, conducted by both Russians and Americans, were aimed at understanding the effects of the space environment on living organisms and testing the safety of spaceflight for humans. Thanks to them, valuable information was collected that helped prepare and secure the first manned flights. However unlikely it may seem, it is possible that the remains of a Russian or American rocket that crashed in or above the Earth's atmosphere and whose crew consisted of, for example, monkeys, fell into the water at the Gdynia Quay. In such a situation, bodies of dead or still living animals could be found on the beach, and the story could be blown out of proportions and evolve into a tale about an alien or aliens in people's imagination, rumors, and finally articles. If it was anything American with any American writing on it, the propaganda would certainly use it. If it was a Russian thing, then they would have tried to keep it secret. Perhaps the fact that the incident was reported in the press only a few days later was because people were wondering whether to write about it at all. If it happened, sometimes it's better to write and follow the report about a flying or crashing saucer than to let the information spread by word of mouth and grow into a story of a human launched into space who fell. This would have been to the detriment of the Russians. What do you think about the case from Gdynia, dear viewers? Do you think there could have been an actual UFO crash at that time? Did a cosmic object fall there, but of terrestrial origin, or maybe fragments of an airplane? Maybe it was a fragment of a meteorite? Or maybe all this is just gossip, fabrication, distortion? Please write in the comments what you think about it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and/or click the like button. Until next time.